And just to let you all know, these photographs are available for sale, these and many more, through his website, which is zubinbalapuriaphotography.com. So if you're really interested, do log on or do get in touch with him. Zubin, are we ready to go with our first?
Absolutely.
So let's pick your first adventure, which if I'm not mistaken, was the solo expedition to the Amazon.
That's right.
It's said that the Amazon River is a wonder of the animal world. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the entire Amazon experience, it's an ecosystem that goes back thousands and thousands of years. And once you're there on the river and in the jungle, in the forest, it's an ecosystem that can harm you. It can kill you if you're not careful, and it can also save you. It's full of medicinal value. And today, I think there's a lot of illegal logging and stuff going on there, which really should be stopped, because it is one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and it really needs to be preserved in the way it was and has been all these many years.
So are we going to, you're going to share some pictures with us and
Sure.
through the journey?
Sure. So, first of all, hello everybody, and thank you for inviting me back again here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you all. And the last time I spoke to you all was with a keyboard and some music. Today I speak to you through the lens of my camera. And I'd like to just take you on a little trip with me. I've been to some exciting places in the last 10 years all over the world. And today I'm going to highlight just 4 of those. And we're going to start off with my expedition to the Amazon in 2014. So first of all, how did I think of the Amazon, why Brazil, etc.? I'm part of a sports group, a bunch of guys who are very passionately fond of sport and extreme adventure. And every year we try and do one trip somewhere that is someplace out of the ordinary. We're also big football fans, and we make it a point to go for every football World Cup. So in 2014, the World Cup was held in Brazil. And if you're a football fan, who would want to miss a football World Cup in Brazil? So off we went to Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, and a couple of other cities to see some football matches. And when we were planning this, I thought to myself that this is the perfect time for me to do this Amazon excursion, because it's very difficult to travel all the way to South America. It's expensive, it's very far away. And since I was there already, I knew that if I didn't go this time, I'd never ever go again. So I didn't want to miss this opportunity. Having said that, the rest of the guys were not keen for various reasons, and it was a bit daunting to go somewhere where I had absolutely no idea what I was letting myself in for and going all alone. And I came very, very close to canceling this trip, very close really, because things weren't working out. I didn't know the guides, I didn't know the area at all, nothing. But finally, I just sort of bit the bullet and said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to go. So I'm going to take you straight to once the World Cup was finished in Rio de Janeiro. Brazil is a very, very big country. And I had to fly from Rio to the town of Manaus, where my boat left. That's a 5-hour flight right across Brazil. So you can imagine 5 hours, meaning it's a really, really big country. So you fly all the way down east to the northwest. And this is where I started the expedition from. So I'm going to start sharing some photographs while I talk to you guys. Let's go straight here. And you should be able to now see a picture of me just before I'm going to board my boat. So this boat is basically somewhat like the ferry that you would take if you live in Bombay and you're familiar with Gateway of India. You would see the ferries that go across or take you for a little chakkar in the ocean. So the boat is something like this. You get a little cabin to yourself, which is extremely, extremely small and cramped. And the boat takes you in up to a point, after which you get onto the canoe. If you can see my mouse there in the front, here is the canoe. And then you get into the canoe and you actually go right deep into the Amazon. So once you go there, this is a better picture, which could let you know, that's my boat in the background. Looks very pretty. And that's the canoe with the canoe operator. And that's how we used to go into the river, onto the river. And just to let you know a little side stories, the first day when you board the boat, They give you a little sort of initiation, about 2 hours, about what to expect, what not to expect, what to do, what not to do. And then at 7 o'clock, you're in the canoe, 7 p.m., you're in the canoe and you're out on the river deep into the jungle. And it's a bit frightening because you can't see anything. I mean, you can't even see the hand in front of your face. And the guide in front has a big spotlight. And I was sitting there and there was a British couple in front of me. And the guy had a spotlight as well, a smaller one. And I had a really, really small one. And the British guy was shining his spotlight all over. And suddenly his wife screamed loudly. And we all almost fell off the canoe. And the guy turned around and she had been bitten by a wasp on her neck. So it was like, you know, straight off into the excitement started straight off on day one. And it was not a very bad bite. She had a little mild fever the next day. And it was, of course, very scratchy and itchy, but no medication required, nothing. But my guide, whose name was Walter, he got stung 2 minutes later by a really, really bad wasp called a black wasp. It is a big, very ugly wasp on his hand. And the next morning when I met him for breakfast, I asked him how his hand was, and he showed me his hand, and it looked like he was wearing a purple glove. It had swollen up tremendously because of the toxins and the toxicity of the venom. And his hand was the color of a beetroot, really dark, dark red. So he said he would have to take an injection somewhere down the line. So the excitement started off right away on day one. So when we go into the Amazon, into the sort of inlets, into the backwaters, that's the canoe. That's some of us sitting on the boat. I'm shooting from another boat. There were 2 canoes like this. And there were a bunch of people, of course, with me. I didn't know them, but I kind of got to know them in the 5 days, 6 days that I spent with them. Here is an abandoned old Indian outpost. So some of you may know that the indigenous native tribes that are in the Amazon, some of them have sort of become slightly more modern, but there are some who actually have no contact with humans, with the outside world, and they want to keep it that way, and I think it's a good thing. So occasionally you do hear of skirmishes between government officials or illegal miners and loggers and these native Indian tribes that live there. This is a native Indian reservation, which is very well looked after by the government of Brazil. You require 3 things for the people of this village to be happy. One is, of course, a school for their children. One is a church. And the third thing is, of course, a football field. Because if you're in Brazil and you have a town without a football field, it wouldn't be a complete town at all. This is shot from the boat, from a very tiny porthole in my cabin. And as we move on, the excitement continues. On day one in the night, this is a baby anaconda. This would be roughly about 5 to 6 feet long, but would grow anywhere to about 14 to 18 feet long. It was coiled around the trunk of a tree. And also to tell you a little bit about the area we were in, the Amazon River is basically a confluence of 2 rivers, the Amazon and the Negro. The Amazon is blue in color. The Negro is actually brown, almost like the color of wine, dark red kind of brown. And that is because thousands and millions of trees actually grow out of the river. And as the leaves fall into the water, the tannic acid that is released by these leaves gives it a very distinct brown color or sort of reddish red wine color. I'll show you some more pictures of that as we go along. But here's a nice little baby anaconda for you. Here's a caiman. They call them caiman, not alligator, crocodile there. He seems to be quite happy, giving us a big smile as we go along. Now, this is an interesting picture. If you look at it very closely, it just looks like leaves all over. But I'm going to hover my mouse in one corner and you tell me if you can see what I'm trying to describe to you. So if you look into the left top corner of your screen, the left top corner where I'm moving my mouse, you will see a giant female tarantula. This tarantula is roughly about a foot in diameter, 1.5 feet in diameter. And female tarantulas are extremely bad-tempered and they can jump 4 feet in any direction, up, left, right, center, wherever. So you don't want to be anywhere close in case they're in a really bad mood. I hope you can kind of make it out. It's one of nature's marvels. It's so beautifully camouflaged. I'm just circling my mouse in the left corner over here. Here are the legs. And that's the body over here. Okay, moving on. This is a morning expedition that we went where you may know that the most dangerous fish in the Amazon is probably the piranha, which is basically a fish that will eat anything. But the thing is, you don't really have to be scared of piranha unless you are actually sort of bleeding in the water. If you are swimming and you are not bleeding from any place, the piranha will completely ignore you. But if you are bleeding from any place and the sight of blood drives them crazy, and they can strip a body down very, very quickly. So you should be careful if you're planning to go for a swim in the Amazon. I'm not fond of fishing, I have to say at this point. This is not a fish that I caught. There was an expedition and I was part of it in the morning, and they did fish. They caught these piranhas and they use them for piranha soup. You don't actually eat the fish, but they're used to flavor the soup. And if you see the teeth, it's like a serrated file. I mean, it's just unbelievable. If you were to run your finger over the teeth, it'll just slash your finger. So you want to stay very far from them while you're in the water. These are giant lilies. So water lilies floating on the surface, absolutely beautiful. Each lily would be, the circumference of these would probably be anywhere between 6 to 8 feet. Really, really big floating fronds in the water, very, very beautiful. But if you push them or sort of prod them with your finger, millions and thousands of flies and insects and mosquitoes will come out of the water and settle all over your face. So if you're not fond of creepy crawlies, perhaps you want to continue on your planned visit to Buckingham Palace or Hong Kong or Singapore and not to the Amazon. This is a very interesting tree. This tree grows out of the water. It is one of the oldest trees in the world. It is 650 years old. And at the base, if you were to encircle the base of this tree, you would need 13 people to hold hands outstretched to actually form a ring around the base. The base is really that fat. And the bottom phalanges, which I will show you here, are so big. Now you can get a sort of idea of how big it is when you see the canoe in the back. You can actually dock your canoe in one of these phalanges. It's that big. It's just enormous. It's just unbelievable sight. And as you can see here, the color of the water, like I said, almost like tea or red wine, very brown, reddish kind of color. And that is because of the tannic acid in the water. Here again, a very, very clear picture of the water in its deep red. And here you'll see a picture of the actual confluence. So if you see the brown and the blue on the top is the Amazon, the brown is the Negro, and this is where they meet. And now for 14 kilometers downstream, you will see it like this, keep merging, 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 till it actually becomes one river, and then it's just known as the Amazon. But you can see how clearly the color of the water is so different from each other. So once again, the Negro at the bottom, the Amazon at the top. The Amazon is one place where you will see the most amazing, amazing sunsets and sunrises, particularly sunsets, because there are approximately 1,400 electrical storms that happen every night on the Amazon, every night. Now you have to understand that it's a huge place. The jungle and the river are surrounded by 7 countries. So 1,400 sounds like a lot, but in the night you can actually see these little lightning bolts happening all over. And you get to see these amazing sunsets as you sort of, you know, as your boat idles or as you're going downstream. Here's another one with some beautiful clouds and reflections. Some very, very unusual sunsets. Here's one with a huge central cloud bank. And if you look at it, it's like an ocean, you know, at one point you can, at its greatest width, it's approximately 14 kilometers from bank to bank. So you can't even see the other side. It's really huge. And here's another beautiful sunset. And I must tell you one small story about my guide. So he's obviously been there about 30, 35 times. And he's a guy who's obviously experienced so much that I asked him one morning, I said to him, Walter, what's the most extreme thing that's happened to you? I mean, we've only got bitten by wasps and seen an anaconda and whatever. So he said, oh, I'll tell you. He said about six months ago, he was on a tour in the Amazon with some guests, and the guests were walking down the jungle trail, and they stopped because a very large frog was right in the middle of the trail. And he said, don't be scared, it's just a frog. And they were like, oh, okay, we're not sure. And he said, all right. So he put his foot at the back of the frog and he gave it a little prod, and he was wearing sandals. And of course, with that prod, the frog jumped into the undergrowth and disappeared. And then 2 days later, when he went back to the boat, his legs started swelling up. And when he went back to Manaus, the Center for Disease in Brazil is, of course, in Manaus, because that's where it's all happening. And he went to the doctor, and he's sort of like the guinea pig of the hospital, you know, because he goes into the jungle so often. So the doctor said to him, now what have you gone and done? Show me. So he said, my foot is swollen like crazy. So the doctor looked at him and said, I've never seen anything like this. Where were you? Which part? Did you touch anything? So he mentioned the frog. And he said, okay, I know what's happened. And he pulled up some frogs on the screen, and he identified the one that he had sort of booted out from there. And so this particular frog, as a defense mechanism, it releases urine, which has a very, very high acidic content. And that's what the frog had done. It had actually peed on his foot, and that the acid from the urine had virtually burnt a hole into his foot, as though someone had drilled a little hole in his foot. And it was not pleasant at all. It was extremely painful, and the doctor had to operate on him. And he was in hospital for 6 weeks. And he said, now when I see a frog, I stay very far. Snakes, I'm okay with. Alligators, caiman, I'm okay. But frogs, I'm going to stay very far from them. So it's a place where you learn something new every day. It's quite unbelievable.
So that was his, Walter's learning. So
yes.
What's your learning on this trip?
So, you know, when I came back and I have these photographs, and I have so many stories, of course, there's not enough time to tell them all. But the thing is, I was so close to canceling this. And finally I said, no, I'm just going to go for it. I'll do it. I'll figure it out somehow or the other. So I think my learning was that sometimes you need to take a little chance, be safe, be careful, be cautious, do your research. You need to do a lot of research if you go on a trip and an adventure like this. But I really felt that was my learning from this, that, you know, sometimes you can push the envelope and you can have a great time, come back safe, happy, healthy, and full of wonderful memories.
So if we were to move to one of your India adventures, let's take Arunachal Pradesh. I remember you telling me that you went through some pretty intense personal experiences. Would you like to share that with us?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I must say that from all my travels from all over the world, I say this not as a patriotic Indian. I am a patriotic Indian, but India is the best place for travel. There is no country like ours, because we have the best mountains, we have the most amazing lakes, rivers, beaches, deserts, you name it, it's all there in India. You just have to get out from your little comfort zone and be willing to explore. So I've had the good fortune of being able to visit the northeast of India very often because of the band I played in. They're very fond of music in that part of the world, that part of India. And we still play a lot of concerts. We played in Nagaland last year. And that gives me the opportunity to visit some places that most people never go to. So I must tell you that the northeast of India is sadly a very, very ignored part of the country. We don't think of going there. We go, if you're traveling in India, you go to Rajasthan, you go to Kerala, Himachal Pradesh for trekking, that kind of thing. But nobody goes to Meghalaya, to Nagaland, to Mizoram. And these are just amazingly beautiful places. So in, when was it? I think 2015, I decided to go to Arunachal. And this was a trip I was really, really looking forward to. And I planned it in such a way that I left on the 31st of December, 1 year from here. And I was extremely pleased because I had some coupons for a free flight. And those coupons allowed me to travel all the way there for just $1,500, where a normal ticket would have cost $17,000. So I was feeling really good and excited, and I was going to be on my own traveling. I had a car and driver. So to get to Arunachal Pradesh, you have to fly to Guwahati, and from Guwahati, you drive to the town of Bomdila, which is just across the border. Now, this is a very, very long drive, and usually you should break it up into 2 days, but I tried to save time, and I tried to do it in one go, which probably wasn't such a great idea. So I left early morning from Bombay, roughly around 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, flight to Calcutta, from Calcutta to Guwahati. At 12 o'clock, my car and driver met me at the airport, and we left for Bomdila. At 5:30, as you, on your way there, you pass the town of Tezpur, and then just before or after, I'm not sure, you cross the Brahmaputra River. Now, this is an incredible sight because the Brahmaputra is another beautiful big river. The sun is going down on one side, and it's an incredible sight. And I was feeling really, really good. I was on the road, it was just a fantastic feeling of elation, and I can't describe it. I was just feeling really good about the whole trip. And I keep saying this because I want to show you what happened shortly after. So we reached Bomdila, and it was getting very, very cold. It's 31st December, that's peak winter time. And all my cold equipment was in my car. And so basically, I had to take this cold stuff out of the car, and my hotel decided to close its gates and lock me out on 31st December. So I had no place to stay. It was very cold by then. The driver found me a new hotel, and that hotel was not such a great hotel, and there was no heating at all. It was about -5 degrees by then, and I was shivering, shaking. I had not eaten any food, and I got around 1 o'clock in the morning, I got a tremendous panic attack. I'm not ashamed to say this. I was shaking, I was shivering, and I was thinking, why am I doing this? I really don't need to do this. I could be sitting comfortably at home with my family. But I kept saying to myself, just wait till the sun comes out. When the sun comes out, it's all going to be okay. And that's what happened around 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, the sun came out. And then I realized for years why people actually pray to the sun. You know, when you pray, villagers, people, anyone, when you look up to the sun and pray, you know when the sun comes out, everything is going to be okay. So the reason I'm telling you this is because just 12 hours before that, I was feeling so good. And 12 hours later, I had this huge panic attack, and it was not a great experience. But sometimes you need to go through this to understand yourself. You need to go through this to understand that you can get through it. You know, just basically hang in there, and good things will come. So that's my little story about this. I'm going to quickly share some photographs with you, and just give me a minute. Yeah. So this is the Kameng River. I hope you can see this now. This is a beautiful waterfall. This is all on the way to Sela Pass. This is a yak. Okay, so this is the pass which takes you to a pass called Sela Pass. Sela Pass is about 14,000 feet, and it's very, very cold up there. It's a pass that takes you to a monastery called Tawang. And my original idea was to reach Tawang, but I abandoned the idea because I thought the pass may get snowed in. And this is a little hut where the Indian Army soldiers get a little breather. I have to say that the Indian Army is fabulous. They really take good care of you if you have any problems in that area. And you have to spare a thought for a Jawan who's standing here, 14, 18 hours on duty at -14 degrees in 14,000 feet. Here's a little family having a picnic right on the top of the mountain. Here's a little temple, a little bridge before. That is Sela Pass. That is actually the pass in the river which is frozen over. That's me in -14 degrees. And that's the road coming down. So before we sign off on this story, I'm just going to quickly tell you why this is called Sela Pass. Sela is another name for Sheila. And in the war, when the Chinese invaded India, a Jawan from the Indian Army held up the Chinese army, just one guy, by shooting at them from different points. And he had two sisters who were giving him ammunition. Eventually, the Chinese army killed the Jawan. They killed his one sister and captured the other. Her name was Sheila. And when the Chinese generals asked her, where is the Indian army? Because there were so many people firing at us. She said, no, it was just one guy. And they said, we don't believe you. So she said, okay, I'll show you where the army is. And she took these two generals right up to a mountain top. And she pointed down at the valley and said, look, there's the army. And when the generals looked over, she caught both of them and she jumped. And she killed both the generals. And of course, she died too. So in her memory, this pass is known as, it's been named after her. Sheila Sela Pass.
Thanks, Zob. But I love that line of yours, wait for the sun to come up. I think it's so relevant to the current situation. I think many a night when I go to bed wondering when I'll get to see my little grandsons, I think, wait for the sun to come up. It'll be a better day tomorrow.
Yeah.
So very good learning. You also did a fantastic trip at the Arctic Circle for the Jaguar Land Rover ice experience. That landscape must be surreal and beguiling sub-zero wilderness. So apart from the cold air, what was it that took your breath away?
So this was another very exciting trip. Again, we were going right up to the Arctic Circle. Again, we were going in January, so it's obviously very, very cold. So the average temperature is about minus 25 degrees. And at its coldest, it was minus 37. So we had to do a lot of research on the clothing and what to buy and what to wear. Now, the thing is, when you do a trip like this, the worst thing to do is to go to your neighborhood store in Bombay and buy a jacket and buy what you think is really cool and going to keep you warm. You need to buy professional equipment for this kind of trip, and you need to be really well clad. So while doing the research, I came upon a very good line where somebody said, there's no such thing as bad weather. It's just bad clothing. So the lesson to be learned from that is, if you are going to do something like this, just be well padded, well equipped, and wear the right clothing. If you wear the right clothing, it's not really that cold. It's cold, but not that cold. So JLR, Jaguar Land Rover Ice Academy, anyone can do this. It's available on the internet. It's a wonderful place in a town called Arjeplog, which is 4 hours south of the Arctic Circle in Sweden. It is basically where Jaguar Land Rover tests all its cars on winter driving. So they do it on a frozen lake. So the lake is completely frozen, and they build 8 tracks on that lake. And as you are over a period of 4 days, you are given a new car every 2 hours, and you drive a different track. And the instructor actually teaches you how to drive on ice. And they encourage you to drive fast. They don't want you to drive slowly. The whole idea is to drive fast, responsible, and to understand what a brilliant marvel of engineering that car is, that, you know, it can really grip the ice. And of course, a lot of safety factors you have to keep in mind. So very quickly, let's take a look at some pictures. And of course, before I started this, we did a little exciting adventure of dog sledding. So I'll just quickly show you some pictures of that as well. And where's my screen share? Yes. So this is what a Husky looks like. It's not your pretty Husky pictures that you see. This is a racing Husky, Swedish Lapland Husky. And they look just like our Paria dogs, but they're a little tougher and a little bigger. This is the sled that you go slow. It's not very inspiring. It just looks like something that your garage mechanic would kick up. And here's when you're in the sled and the dogs are running. These dogs are just born to run. They'll just go on running. They just love running. They love pulling the sled. That's a friend of mine in the front. And when you press the brake, the dogs turn around and look at you as though, like, please don't do that. Let us run. Let us run. As you can see, I'm pretty well padded over here. And then from here on, we go to Arjeplog, and first morning sunrise looks something like this. And as the day wears on, the track, this is the track that you see in front. You can see the cars in the distance. It really looks like something like you're on planet Mars or some outer world experience. And here are some of the cars that we drove. That's the Velar, which I think has been launched in India about two years ago. Very beautiful car, lovely to drive. That's the Range Rover Sport, beautiful beast of a machine, but again, fun to drive. That is a prototype which has been released, and we were not allowed to drive this car. Only the instructors could drive this car. This is the final trip when we go right up to the Arctic Circle one early morning. Absolutely beautiful sunrises, and that is actually at the Arctic Circle. And so if you continue north from here for 48 hours, you would reach the North Pole. It is, of course, very, very cold. So if you're fond of driving, I would highly, highly advise any of you all to do this. It's not an extreme adventure of sorts. It's a wonderful driving experience.
We have some sports enthusiasts here. Shreya, wouldn't you like to do this thing? This kind?
I'd love to.
Shreya, if you're fond of driving, I mean, it is unbelievable. The cars are fantastic. You're really encouraged to drive fast, and you're never driving actually straight. You're always driving, sliding, slipping and sliding. So the idea is that you can take a turn optimally without having to actually brake. Fantastic experience. If you like driving, I would just encourage anybody to sign up, and anybody can do it. There's a training period in the morning, and they teach you how to do it. The British instructors are excellent, really worth doing. It's called the Jaguar Land Rover Ice Experience. You can look it up on the internet.
Thanks.
So what did you come back, when you came back and you thought about it, what were the reflections?
So again, this was a trip that I almost canceled because personally, I'm not really that fond of driving. I'm not a big car enthusiast, but again, we decided to go, and the memories are absolutely fabulous. And the other thing that struck me is that you drive from 9 o'clock in the morning to 4:30 in the evening with a lunch break. And of course, you don't want to spin. If you spin out of control, then you go into the snowbank, which is no big deal. There's a tow van that comes and pulls you out. But the joke is that you have to buy the driver a drink in the evening at the bar because it's not great fun for him at minus 36 degrees to be out hooking your car and pulling you out. So you concentrate, the concentration required is very, very intense. So you're really concentrating hard from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And when you come back to the hotel, you can't do anything. You literally have to just get into your bed and sleep for an hour and a half because you are mentally absolutely exhausted. So I found this a great learning that, sometimes it's not just the physical strength that you require, but it's also a mental strength that you require to do something really well and in a positive way.
Thanks, Zoe. I know you've been to Ladakh, and I once read a quote that said that when exploring Ladakh, be a traveler and not a tourist. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because see, most people when they go to Ladakh, I'm sure a lot of you have been as well. You basically fly into Leh, you see a couple of monasteries, you maybe go to one other town, then you come back. But that's not really Ladakh. Leh is the capital. It's a town, city, but Ladakh. So before I went to Ladakh, I thought Arunachal Pradesh was the most beautiful place on earth that I've ever seen. But I think after I went to Ladakh, I changed my opinion of that because it is the most unusual topography you will ever see. So the thing, if you haven't been to Ladakh, the thing to know is that you go to a tremendous height. Leh is at 11,500 feet. And if you're coming from Bombay or Bangalore, which is practically at sea level, you are going to a very high place and you should not go very fast. So if you fly in, you need to spend a day doing nothing so that you get acclimatized. So we didn't do this, we actually drove. So what we did is we flew to Chandigarh, and from Chandigarh, we took a car and went to Manali. We spent 2 days in Manali because Manali is about 6,000 feet. We did some climbing there to acclimatize. From Manali, we went to another town called Jispa, which is around 9,000 feet, spent one more night there. And then finally, we did the long 11-hour ride all the way from Jispa to Leh. Now, this drive is not something that most people do because for starters, it's 11 hours and most people don't want to be in a car for 11 hours. But I have to tell you that what you will see on this drive is just absolutely amazing. So you might have heard of the popular saying, it's the journey, not the destination. And in Ladakh, that's definitely what it is. It's the journey, not the destination. And here's a couple of photographs that I'd like to share with you. So when you leave from Jispa and you go to Leh, On the way, you will see the Pang Plateau, very, very unusual topography. This plateau is 30% in India and 70% in Tibet. What you see here are actually just wind formations. This is not man-made. These are wind-blown formations that form in the sand here. This could be something straight out of probably McKenna's Gold or Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is again absolutely not man-made. It's just the way the wind blows and erosion of the soil. Once again, some pretty looming mountains and interesting rock face. This is Ibex, the mountain goat. So once we finished with Leh, we went to a town called Turtuk. To go to Turtuk, you go through the Nubra Valley, which is a beautiful valley. And here you see these Bactrian camels. These are the two-humped camels, and you don't see this anywhere else in India. The Bactrian camels are found only in the Nubra Valley in Ladakh. Here's a whole herd of camels. Okay, so there's an interesting story here now. So when we reached the village of Turtuk, we made friends with the headman there. And the interesting thing about Turtuk is it's a village that was in Pakistan actually till the 1971 war. And during the war, Pakistan ceded territory and the village of Turtuk became part of India overnight. Now this I thought was quite a fascinating story because it's like telling you, if we were all told like tomorrow you're going to be Pakistani citizens, I don't think any of us would be really jumping for joy. And that's what would have happened to these citizens. They were Pakistani citizens one day and the next day they became Indian citizens. So I asked the headman how he felt about it. And he said, look, it's a long time ago, 50 years ago. We've gotten over it. Now we consider ourselves part of India. And the Indian army looks after us very well here. So we're very happy. But then he narrated a story which I'd like to narrate to you because I thought it was fascinating. So he said, look, in times of war, when these boundaries get redrawn, there is so many problems that the people on the ground face. So his niece had got married and moved to another town. Now, when this territory became part of India and the boundary and the border changed, her village stayed in Pakistan, but her family village became part of India. And she could not visit it because this is a closed border. So for many years, she had no contact except by phone with her family. And then one day she got a message saying that her mother was dying. And if she wanted to visit her, she should come quickly. Now, the problem is she couldn't cross the border. So she had to, from her village, take a bus or God knows what to the nearest town, then a train to either Lahore or Karachi to take a plane, fly from there to Delhi, go to Chandigarh, Manali, Leh, and Leh up to Turtuk. And it took her 1 month to make this journey to get to her mother's village. Now, the best part of it is if there was no border problem and if she had just walked across as the crow flies, it would take her just 1 hour. Just 1 hour. And instead, it took her 1 month to do this trip. But she did it. She spent 3 weeks with her family. Her mother passed away, and then it took her 1 month to come all the way back to her village. I thought it was just a fascinating story of what humans have to go through when governments decide to, do strange things. So that's the village of Turtuk. From Turtuk, we go on to Pangong Lake, which is a very famous lake in Ladakh. It's very, very beautiful. The colors in the water are beautiful, absolutely pristine blue, aquamarine green kind of shades, depending on the sunlight and how it reflects off the water. And then we drove to the other lake, which is called Somoriri. And this is again a trip that not very many people do because it's another 11-hour drive and there is not a soul on this road. So you have to carry your tent and sleeping bag because if you have a breakdown, you will just have to bunk in there till the army truck passes you and then tows you to the nearest repair center. So luckily we had no breakdown, but beautiful mountains in the background. Himalayan wild ass is what you see running across all the time. Beautiful looking animals. And then you reach this small little lake, which is a lake just before Somoriri. It's, I think, called Chota So, meaning small lake. So means lake. So Pangong, So Moriri. And this is Somoriri, beautiful early morning, wild horses grazing. This is a town of Temisgang. It looks like completely something surreal. I beg your pardon, this is not Temisgang, this is Lamayuru. This is a monk in Lamayuru Monastery, a lady praying in Lamayuru Monastery. This was a lady walking towards a village, which is another story I'd like to tell you. There are two villages in Ladakh called Da and Hanu. These villages have their own language. They don't speak Ladakhi. They speak a little bit of Hindi. And the inhabitants of these villages are supposed to be actually descendants of Alexander the Great's army. So they actually look very different. They don't look Indian. They don't look Ladakhi. They look almost Eurasian. This is not one of them, but I'll just show you a picture. So I'm just going to forward. This is the inhabitants of Da and Hanu, a mother and son. If you see their features, extremely, extremely different looking. Brown, orange hair, very fair, very unusual looking. And on the way there, we stopped at a Tibetan village. I'm just going to go back a bit. And this was a wedding held in a Tibetan village where we stopped, took some photographs. This is a picture of the mother of the bride. I thought I captured her in a very nice, pensive mode or mood, whatever you can call it, where she's probably thinking about her daughter's future, or, you know, what are the days to come and what lies ahead for a young girl that she's brought up in her family. Jumping ahead, these are very, very strange rock textures that you see along the way. Ladakh is just amazing. Every corner, every bend is really, really interesting. And going back to Da and Hanu, here is a lovely picture of the matriarch of the family. They wear this headdress. And this is one village where women take all the decisions. It's a very strong matriarchal society. So 14 days in Ladakh, lots of other stories, but I'm afraid not enough time to tell them all.
If I were to ask you to sum up for us how all these adventures helped in making you a better human being, what would you say to us?
Well, the first thing, you know, I think when you travel like this and you meet honest, simple people, particularly in India, you know, it kind of turns your mind and your headspace to think about all the problems that you think, you know, after you see a family that lives in minus 20 degrees, making, growing berries and growing sun-dried tomatoes and stuff like that, and living in extreme poverty and still running around and still fun, still being happy and talking to you jovially, and then you come back and then you're complaining about the traffic at Pedder Road. You know, it makes you feel very small and humble, you know. It makes you feel stupid, actually. At least that's what it does to me. So I think for me, I'm actually done with visiting places. I mean, I love going to Europe and I love the beautiful cities of Europe, and I do appreciate the architecture, the food, the wine, and everything that those places have to offer. But for me now, I would much rather go to places like this, you know, where one doesn't often go, and meet the people there and understand these people, understand what are their troubles. And when you do that, you find that they have the same problems, the same issues, the same happy things. They just want the best for their children. They just want a good education. They just want a good life. That's what we all want, actually, really. And I think we just unnecessarily complicate things when we sit back in the comforts of our home, and we get upset over small things. And I think this is the take home for me. Just be happy, be positive, and meet a lot of people, smile, laugh a lot, go with your friends, have a drink, eat good food. That's it. That's all there is to life.
Thanks, Zub. Thank you, Zubin. Thanks a lot for sharing all these experiences, the photographs. I know it's not always easy to talk about the difficulties or personal lows, so we really appreciate your candidness.
Thank you.
And the photographs, they told another story altogether. So thanks, and we'll move on to our second segment, which focuses on leadership. So the definition of leadership reads as the art of motivating a group of people to act towards a common goal. We asked 3 youth members of our chapter to give us their views on leadership. So we have with us this evening Tushna Siganpuria, Sheria Runwala, and Dilshad Jalnawala. And if you switch to a speaker view, I think it'll be better because you will hear each of them. You'll know who's talking. So once we finish with them, we will then take their views to our chapter chair, former Air Chief Marshal Fali Major, to hear how he practiced leadership in his 42 years with the Indian Air Force. So let me start with Tushna. Tushna, much of your career has been spent in the corporate sector. You've worked with TCS, SAP, Rolls-Royce, and you've also been an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Through all this, what would you say are the 2 qualities you'd look for in a good leader?
Great question, Zareen. So, as we're talking of leadership lessons, I think my earliest lessons with leadership has been around the fact that it's qualities of vision, it's a quality of courage, and it's the quality of having, a sense of driving a passion amongst the teams that work with you. I really think the first most important quality for leadership is courage. It's the courage to take on a vision. It's the courage to take on a particular goal that an organization has. And I think I learned this lesson way back when I started my own, business. Courage then meant to go and first start off as an entrepreneur. And the leadership lesson for me was, and I remember talking about this in my last, webinar on change, and we spoke about the pivot, the courage to pivot, the courage to start something new, the courage to make sure that you can instill the change. And I think that's one of the most important qualities of a leader. And once you have that courage, it's so often when I've been, leading functions in the organization, the first thing I'm always told is, we've always done it this way, so don't make a change, right?
Yeah.
But leadership is the courage to say, yes, there can be something which we can do different. Leadership is knowing that vision, the big picture, but also instilling the purpose. And that's what I think what differentiates a manager from the leader. The manager will talk about the what, the how do you do it, but the leader will always bring in the why. And a leader always talks, about the value that it brings to each person in the team, the value it brings for the team by and large. So I think it's passion, it's courage, and purpose.
Okay,
That's
so I'll
really
pick
important.
up from team, and then I'll ask Sheria, because Sheria, you've had varied experiences. You've been sales, marketing, product development. You've been in both retail and international businesses. Over the last 16 years, you've worked with companies like Titan and TI Cycles. So if I were to ask you, what would a leader's role be in team performance? What would you say to that?
Hi, Zareen. First of all, thanks for having us here. I think I would agree with one thing which Tushna said about the purpose. Having a strong purpose and ensuring that your team knows what the purpose is, so that they're all chasing that. Besides that, I think the other thing which I feel is very important is to lead by example. And I'll in fact share an example of an incident which had happened, one of the many incidents. So I was on a market visit to Nasik, and there was a showroom which had opened just about 3 months ago, a track and trail showroom, which was a bicycle retail store. And when I walked in there, I was quite disappointed to see that the showroom was quite messy. And I noticed, on the cash counter, there were some dirty marks over there. So I asked the store manager, why was it dirty? And he said, no, sir, during the inauguration, we had stuck some balloons, and wo sticker ka mark hai, wo nikal nahi raha hai. So I was quite livid actually, but then I just quietly smiled, stepped out of the showroom, walked a couple of blocks away to a kirana store, which I had noticed while walking in, and picked up some cologne spray and a cloth. Walked back into the showroom, and I just quietly started cleaning it myself. That poor manager almost fell off his chair, and he came running saying, no, sir, main karta hu, I'll do it, please leave it and all that. He was quite embarrassed. But rather than shouting at him and probably giving him a lower score on his retail audit and stuff, I thought, let's just do it and show him that it can be done. And I repeated this a couple of times in many other places. And what happened as a result was that I didn't have to then tell them anytime again. It was just something that they all did, and my team saw me doing it. So after that, my team started doing the same thing. In fact, a couple of weeks later, that gentleman then sent me a message saying, "Sir, please come to my showroom again. I'm keeping it well." So I think that I would say is important to, and this is something which I didn't, think of or invent. It's something which I learned from my seniors and leaders in Titan. In fact, Bhaskar Bhatt, our managing director, then I'd seen him doing similar things.
So lead by example is what?
By example, yeah, absolutely. Rather than preaching, I think if you take the lead and do difficult things, and your team is looking at you doing it, I think they'll learn to choose the right thing over the easy thing.
Right. So let me move to Dilshad. Dilshad, you're an inspirational speaker. And very recently, you've emerged as our new leader in our own chapter at WZCC. Would you say that effective communication skills are an asset to you in this role as a leader?
Okay. We all know the saying that eggs once broken and words once spoken cannot be repaired. So yes, of course, I believe that effective communication is extremely important when we are dealing with people. But when we talk about leadership communication, as I understand it, it is a complex process and it needs a clear understanding of the goal for communication. So as a part of WZCC, my goal is to involve people, give them psychological safety. And when I talk of psychological safety, I mean that people should feel free to express their ideas without the fear of being let down or insulted or anything like that. Although we all agree to disagree. Okay. As a WZCC member, I also try to encourage people, motivate them, and let them find their value for being a part of WZCC. So while clear and timely communication are extremely important, what I try to do is try to be a good listener. So I try to have an open mind to ideas and understand that each individual deserves respect. So my values play an important role in my communication. And I believe that no matter what style of leadership one follows, effective communication is and has to be a common trait.
Thanks, Dilshad. Yeah, you were talking about what different styles of leadership. So if I were to pick four, let's say directing, coaching, supporting, delegating, Shehryar, what style would you adopt as a leader? You are now an entrepreneur. You've also been in the corporate world. So looking at both those fields, which style would you adopt and why?
That's a very interesting question and something which I actually learned the hard way. So for the first 10 years of my career, I had worked mostly in independent roles. And that was when I was in Titan. And when I moved to TI Cycles, I took on a role where I was heading a team of around 11 people. I was heading the retail division. And, I just assumed over the years while working as an independent contributor in Titan, I just kept noticing the good things and the bad things that my bosses or my seniors would say or do. And I used to make a little mental note of how I should be with my team when I have a team. And that's how I started doing it. I started, I would say, more with, giving them a lot of freedom to do their own thing. And then within about 6 months, I realized that while I may have been a popular boss, I wasn't able to get the results that I wanted. So I went and spoke to one of our senior people there who was responsible for learning and development at a corporate level. And then he explained to me about the different styles of leadership. And what I realized was that you need to tweak your leadership style with each individual in the team. Some of them may be self-starters. Some of them may need a little prodding and pushing. Some of them may feel nervous about what they're doing and they may want reassurance. They may know what they have to do, but they may want reassurance. And then not just that, it's not just a different leadership style with different people, but also a different leadership style at a different point of time. So for instance, I had one of my team members who was quite a high performer. But then during the, post the demonetization, and then the GST rules came in. So the business had dropped quite a bit. So while he was a self-starter, a good performer, due to, reasons beyond his control, business wasn't going the way it should have gone, right? So then I need to switch my style and become a little more of a coach, try and motivate him a little more, travel with him, try and help him out. So I think it's situational. I think you have to be very cautious about what the team needs, and then accordingly choose your style.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm going to come into characteristic of ethics in a leader. Tushna, how important do you think ethics are?
Zareen, super important and super difficult. And I can cite, two examples or two experiences. One as an entrepreneur and one as I have, been in an organization. But the underlying principle from me every time I have led has been, and we talk of ethics, has been just keeping in mind Manashni, Gavashni, Kunashni, good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And no matter what you do, be it in a business or, after being an entrepreneur and then pivoting to an organization, being ethical, being honest, and having courage to do the right have always been, something I have learned and adopted. So I remember when we were doing business, and we had this one particular customer who came up to us. This was way back in the year 1999, 2000s, when this entire boom of, the ITES industry had started, and our business was around recruiting and training. So I won't take names of the companies, but then they came to us and asked us to do something which is not ethical, something with money and under the table. And we took a conscious decision at that time not to do so. And we thought, okay, maybe we've lost one of our biggest customers. Funnily enough, a few weeks later, they came back to us and they said, we're going to do business the way you want us to do business with you. And we asked them the question as to, we asked that recruiter out there, why are you saying so? And the statement that came back was, because you're trustworthy. Ethics and trustworthiness is what I had learned on that day. And I always promised myself that it's always going to be a mantra I'm going to keep with me. Another example or another experience I had, in terms of leadership is all about being trustworthy. And if you have to inspire trust in your teams, if to, lead with trust, I think first as a leader, you have to be trustworthy. And to be trustworthy, you have to be honest and you have to go by ethics. But even beyond that, I think trust was something I've, learned to build within teams. So I remember when I first joined Rolls-Royce, and we had this huge challenge. And the challenge was onboard 300 people in the next 2 months, because a few things had not gone well before I came on board. APAC team and the India team were just not seeing eye to eye. The bridge of trust was gone. And here I'm this new person come in, so-called leading the, people strategy function. And all I did was to sit down and start building that trust bridge. But for that, I had to appear trustworthy. I had to gain that trust. And it took a lot of, consistent communication, credibility. It took a lot of being honest with everybody about what will work, not work. And it also took a lot of, talking to teams and understanding and telling them why we were doing things in a particular way, the purpose of it. And the minute everybody understood that, the minute all of us were honest with each other, we all started aligning to a common purpose, a common vision, and the bridge of trust started getting better and better. I completely believe, ethics, trust, trustworthiness are increasingly important for leadership as well as for high-performing teams. So that's been my experience.
Thanks, Tushna. Thank you. Last question to Dilshad. Dilshad, do you think that a leader needs to be a people's person?
Okay, very often we see that, one's pride or insecurity, moodiness, perfectionism, sometimes oversensitivity, or even negativism become roadblocks to understanding others. So although I never say that I'm a perfect person, and I'm not, but I always try to understand my feelings towards others so that I can build good relationships. I also agree to what Steve Jobs says, that if you want to make everyone happy, don't be a leader, sell ice cream. So for me, being a people's person is important in the sense that a leader has to have good relationships with the team members. A leader has to be inclusive. A leader should look at individual development and growth. A leader should be able to understand the other person and should be able to motivate them from their perspective. But at the same time, a leader should also keep the organization's goals first. A leader should be able to tackle difficult situations, take a stand when required, and even if required, handle criticism. So, as I understand it, it's a fine balance.
You're right. It definitely is. So thank you, all three of you, for sharing your experiences and your views. So let me move the focus now to former Air Chief Marshal Fali Major. I don't know what more I can say about Fali in an introduction that Wikipedia and Google have not already captured, or that some news article, a citation of an award, or a listing of Parsi luminaries have not already stated about him. I've only known him as a friend and a colleague, but if that's anything to go by, I'm sure he made one hell of a chief. So the first question I've been longing to hear the answer to is, at every function, Fali, you say that it's ironical that you are the chapter chair of a chamber of commerce, considering that you've never headed a business. But certainly you can draw parallel lines between what our youth said about leadership and your experiences in the Air Force.
Thank you, Zareen. Firstly, let me go to these few youngsters who just spoke. And to be quite honest, I was quite delighted in the manner initially Zubin, I mean, it didn't relate to leadership or learning, but it did relate to adventure. And I think he's a well-traveled man. Now, coming to the young entrepreneurs, business people and professionals, it was very nice hearing their version of leadership in various levels and roles. But leadership traits, attributes, styles are as old as history itself. The only changes which take place are with your environment, your advancement, and your technology. The basic traits, the fundamental traits of leadership will never ever change. And now coming to military leadership, the main difference between leadership in businesses, other professions, etc., is that military leadership is at a level which involves national and military objectives. Now relate that to your company or your organization roles and tasks and objectives again. There is a lot to learn from both, from the military leadership as well as corporate or civilian leadership. Now, let me just say that when I talk of military objectives, military missions, mission objectives, and mission execution, to you it would be put in terms of finance and other things, it would be your monthly, quarterly, and yearly returns as to how well you achieve. The only difference being that for your quarter, you have a quarter to work on. But for a military mission, The time is in hours, minutes, and seconds. So your decision-making cycle has to be tuned in a manner where immediate decisions are taken at all levels. And therefore, the first tenet of military leadership is centralized control, centralized observation, but decentralized execution of all tasks. And I think that applies equally in any business or enterprise also. That a leader will not go nitpicking on issues which he shouldn't be involved in. Now, actually among the youngsters, I have a question to ask them. In your perspective, is a leader a person who has a very large following? Or is one of his tasks also to groom and mold more leaders as he goes along? Now that a noble leader will always do that. He will always also look for grooming and bringing up more leaders in his team or organization. He should not be self-centered. He or she should always be able to share his or her experience and exposure with the entire team to go along. Now, they also spoke of ethics. Now, ethics, moral, honesty, integrity are tenets and attributes which apply across the board. Now, I would like to ask these youngsters that if I were to tell them to assess their team on an annual or a half-yearly basis on these attributes, what we just spoke about, which encompasses basically ethics. And if I were to give you a 1 to 9 scale, I would like any one of them to answer this question. And if you were to rate a very important member of your team in integrity and honesty on a 1 to 9 scale, how would you grade him or her? Can any of the youngsters answer?
Tushna, go ahead.
This is very interesting as a question. And because I have pondered upon it, very often, and I think I would rate them at a 7, but always find an opportunity to increase it and take it upon myself to build that environment and opportunity where I can grow to a 9 at some point of time. But today it would be a 7 is how I would peg it at.
Well, now let me bring in the military difference now that you've told me this. In terms of honesty and integrity, a good leader will rank that person either 0 or 9. Because integrity is not in levels, neither is honesty. You're either honest or dishonest. There is no medium level in honesty and integrity. You're either honest or you're not honest. How would you judge that? And that is why I always ask this question, that on a 1 to 9 scale, how would you judge these 2 traits? Other traits is very easy to judge because you see the performance, etc., etc. But now, as long as a leader in any organization understands this principle, in my opinion, he'll have very few problems with his team. Because the message will go loud and clear. Now, having said that, of course, in today's environment, it may become a little difficult to do this kind of judgment. In the military, it's very simple. Now, let me go to another point which we spoke about. You know, in business or in your profession or anywhere in life, you have ups and downs. You're successful in some attempts. You want to sell toothpaste. In one quarter, you sell 1 million tubes. In the next quarter, it just comes down to 30. But at the end of the year, financial year, you achieve your target. That is what matters. Now, also in the military, remember that everything that you do on a day-to-day basis, people have that feeling, you know, it's a very well-disciplined, regulated service, so there's no issue. There are issues, even in the military. And as a leader, your biggest task is to handle these impediments as you go along in the finest possible way. Now, as I said, I gave the example of toothpaste. In the case of the armed forces, these are battles and skirmishes. It's at a different level. You may win some, you may lose some, but at the end of the day, if you win the war, you achieve your aim. Now, this is how I compare, you know, the civil side of business and professions with the military. In the military, the other very, very important thing is the evolution of the organization itself. If we go back 40, 50 years and we see what the organization is today, it's very different. And so it is in the business world. You know, the changing world order, the changing socio-economic environment around the world makes a huge difference in any business or profession too. As the national security imperatives and strategic imperatives around the country in which you are change military thought and military practices. While this is at a national and strategic level, so also in large organizations, it becomes a strategic issue given the kind of competition large businesses and others get into. So when I talk of military perspectives of leadership, they're not very different. And the fun, like to give you a very small example, again a question, is a leader born? Is he groomed? Or does he have to qualify to be a leader? Any answers from the youngsters?
He's
go with that.
groomed.
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
He's groomed.
I feel he's born. It's an inherent characteristic.
Anything else?
I would say it's a combination of both. And I think
that.
I think you grow.
Who's this?
So you've got lots of people answering, Fali.
Actually, yeah. But I've seen the answers also. I think it's a combination of all of what you just said. Let me give you an example. In the armed forces, we have a Defense Institute of Psychological Research. And they keep your records from the day you go for your selection into the armed forces. Okay, so when you do your first psychomotor test for your intelligence and your leadership qualities, you write your answers on that little piece of paper and give it to them. And let me give you my example. When I was the chief of the air staff, I went to inaugurate a new building of the Defense Institute of Psychology. And the Director General there tells me, he says, sir, as is traditional, any senior person who visits us, he has to spend 15 minutes separately in our analytical lab. And there he gave me the question paper which I had answered in 1964. And he just said, do you mind sitting down and writing the answers? So I jokingly told him, I said, what happens if I fail? Will I be removed from my job presently? So he said, no, sir, I would like you to answer it. So I sat down and whatever came to my mind, I wrote that there were 10 questions and I wrote the answers. From the other drawer, he pulled out my answer sheet of 1964 and he put it next to it. There was no difference. Because that is when it dawned on me, and he explained it very well, saying that your basic leadership qualities don't change, but they improve with experience and exposure. So that is why I said, when you say is a leader born or otherwise, it is a combination of everything. And that should be remembered by everyone from the day you start. Because even the very first job you get, you have leadership roles there also. Maybe you may be the junior most guy sitting in the office, but that peon who works for you or guy who gets you a cup of tea is your team member then. And even he will judge you whether you have leadership qualities or not with his comparisons. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these are a few things. Now, if I were to go into my total experience of leadership over 42 years, it will take me 3 days to tell you.
No, but I have questions for you still.
You still have questions?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to know, how did your leadership style, in the command, operational, administrative, in all those 42 years, pan out under different situations? So the conflict war situation, or the humanitarian rescue relief operations, or HR and materials management. Did you change your style of leadership?
No, I didn't. I didn't. Because your style of leadership should always remain the same at whatever level you are. When I was a young pilot sitting in the cockpit on an important mission, okay. And if I were to do the same mission as a senior officer, I would do the same. I would lead my formation the same way. There would be no change. But when it comes to the different aspects of military life, what you just spoke about, whether it's an operational mission, an administrative task, a logistical task, or whether it is a humanitarian task. Let me give you one example about this. We all know about the very bad tsunami that struck in 2006. Am I right? I think 26th of January, a day after Christmas. And at that time, I was the Deputy Chief of the Integrated Defense Staff Operations. And I got a call on the golf course at about 6:15 in the morning that there has been a tragedy in the Andaman Islands. And my task as the Deputy Chief Operations was coordinating all operational tasks of all three services, the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. And from the minute I got the call, of course, I left the golf course immediately and rushed to the operations center. And we realized what had happened. Now that was a dimension which I hadn't experienced before, because we had to coordinate the working of all three services. My leadership style did not change, because now I was handling all three services under one head. I was also handling the Indonesian Navy, the Malaysian Navy, their air forces, the Sri Lankan, Bangladesh air forces, and their navies. Because what happened was, in this entire area affected, India was the nerve center for the humanitarian relief, rescue, and rehabilitation later. Now, that was an entirely different dimension, which, as a basic military man, you don't deal with on a daily basis. And it was a task which was humongous. At any one time, you had about 40, 50 ships and about 60, 70 aeroplanes airborne for rescue from all over this entire Southeast Asian region. Now, unless your instructions are implicit and you leave it to your, various heads of various departments to handle their own thing, an operation like this can never go through. So the lesson I learned and a lesson for others to learn is that if your leadership style has been to achieve results, may it be any situation, you will be successful. And I think we did a damn fine job, which lasted about almost a month. But these are the times when your leadership really comes into play, not only when you're absolutely on the head of the organization. So at every stage of your life, you'll undergo leadership experiences, which will only keep adding on as you go along.
So Fali, when you command forces in different geographical locations, so you could have a central command, you'll have the eastern command, you'll even have Siachen territory. The motivation, morale is different in each. Then as a leader, how do you deal with that?
When you talk of motivation, the way you motivate a salesman, because here, the team effort which is required is humongous. When you're flying a 2-aircraft formation on a strike, the trust you have in your wingman, if you don't have that trust and leave him to his job, in all likelihood, both of you will go and pile up somewhere or will be shot down. So this is where the difference is. The trust and faith in another team member is absolute in the armed forces. You cannot even suspect the other person's intention, which in a business or other organization, you're always worried, okay, is that guy doing the right thing or not? That is the difference. Here, it is implicit faith. When you see an aerobatic team of 9 aircraft doing formation aerobatics, whether you see the Surya Kirans here or the Blue Angels in the US, okay, the leader is the ultimate man. If he flies the rest of the aeroplanes into the ground, the others will go with him into the ground. It's as simple as that. So leadership in the armed forces is in many ways very different about leadership, what you speak about elsewhere. But the implicit faith, trust, and confidence in your team is the watchword of leadership within the armed forces. It's the fundamental.
Fali, if we're to talk about communication skills, being, we've already said it's an important asset, but when you're leading in the Air Force at any rank, your team is made up of men from different cultures, from different economic backgrounds, from all over the country. So then how can you ensure that you're communicating with a skill that ensures effective and organized teams?
It is inherent in the armed forces. Communication skills, of course, are very important when it comes to training. When it comes to, group activities. Like, for example, in the army, if it's a Sikh regiment, and there are Parsis and Anglo-Indians and, Biharis and Keralites, everybody from different parts of the country. In a Sikh regiment, everyone will on one particular day go to the Gurdwara and amongst themselves learn the language of the regiment background. Okay. Now that is the culture here, which is not possible. So when you talk of communication skills here, it is built in. Now to give you another example, in the army, when a platoon is being led into battle somewhere, maybe there is one officer or officer and a JCO. The remaining are all the Jawans. Now, the person leading that platoon has the implicit faith of everybody in that group. And each and everyone understands each other. Now, you know, when you talk of communication skills, we don't have too many TED Talks and, you know, which is a requirement in the business. The better you speak, the more, you know, articulate you are better off, you're a better leader. Bullshit. That doesn't happen in the armed forces. In the armed forces, every person should understand each other. That is what we call good communication. And there should be no doubts in anyone's minds. So communication skills, when you talk about, yes, they're very good. You know, when you're in the staff college or when you're in this thing, you want to speak well to impress somebody else. Good, very good. Now, it is not to impress people or to sing. In the armed forces, it is how well you understand your task. Now, if you're able to relate that task correctly to a group, your communication skills are good. Otherwise, no. So it's a very different ball game.
That was interesting, Fali. Then share with us which qualities of a leader were most required as Chief of the Indian Air Force.
You see, when you're the Chief of a force, like the Indian Air Force, it's a 140,000 strong force, the fourth largest air force in the world, and with huge national and national security responsibilities. Now again, let me go back to the youngsters. That when I forgot to mention one thing, the higher you rise, the more responsibility you have, the more authority you have, but along with it also comes a lot of accountability. And that should never be forgotten. That it's not that because you're the chief, you just sit back, smoke cigars and relax. It doesn't work that way. The responsibilities, of course, of the Chief of Air Staff are huge because you are directly responsible to the Defense Minister and the Supreme Commander. So every action of yours is watched, assessed by practically every person in the country, not just by your own bosses. So your responsibilities are huge, your accountability is huge, and that's when your leadership comes into real play. What is the welfare of your men? Like in the Air Force, the motto is touch the sky with glory. Mission first, people always. That's the policy we follow. Because you see, you may be the most advanced Air Force in the world. You may have the finest equipment, the finest weaponry. But it is the human being who turns it into capability. And therefore, the human element remains very, very important in the armed forces. You may have the finest, but if you have a gang of, bunch of duffers, that equipment is as good as not available with you. Now, this is the principle which is followed in the armed force, that your mission is always first, but your people are very, very important. So their training, their grooming is a responsibility which emanates right from the top and goes to the lowest rung in the ladder.
Okay, I'm going to round it off with one last question, which I'm sure lots of people are longing to ask you, but will never have the guts to. But I'm putting myself on the line now and asking you, what's the leadership ranking at home, Fali?
At home, from the day I've got married, I am the 2IC. Now, 2IC in military terms is the second fiddle, the second guy, the second person, not the commander-in-chief, but one below him. Because in the armed forces, we have a saying that if I am a squadron leader in rank, my wife is a wing commander, one rank higher. And it continues throughout your service. So now you know the ranking in the house.
Thanks very much, Fali. I know a lot of people have probably been waiting a long time to hear you talk about your experiences. We'll just allow 3 questions from the audience because we don't have very much time. Is there anybody who would like to ask Fali anything about his life, 42 years in the Air Force?
I would like to ask a question, Zareen.
Sure.
Can you see me? Yeah.
Yes.
Who's this?
You know, Fali, one of the things we have to take into consideration is that in the Army, Air Force, or for that matter, Navy, there is a hierarchical line. So more often than not, a command is carried through regardless of whether the follower thinks it's the right thing or not. Is there an opportunity for a person who's immediately under you or a few people under you to turn around and say, no, sir, I think this is wrong?
Thank you, Feroz. It happens on a daily, hourly basis in the armed forces, at least in the Air Force. I don't know about the Navy and the Army so much. In the Air Force, we not only encourage people from asking direct questions, because in the Air Force, we start our day with a morning briefing in the squadrons. Start with the meteorological briefing, your day's mission profile briefings. And after that, once the flying is over, we come back, there is a debrief session. And in that debrief session, if the commanding officer of that unit was flying as a leader, and a young flying officer was flying as his number 3 or number 4, and if he finds that his leader took a wrong decision in a particular strike or whatever he was doing, that's the time he tells him, he says, sir, what you did was absolutely wrong. And then the commanding officer either justifies why he does it, or he admits his fault. See, in the Air Force, please remember, the fighting force are all officers. Unlike the Army, where in the Army, 98% of the fighting force are the Jawans. Just 2% or 3% are the officers. In the Air Force, it's exactly the other way around. Our men are very highly qualified compared to the other services, because they're handling very sophisticated equipment. So they concentrate more on maintaining those aeroplanes, sensors, radars, other things, active and going. But even the men, let me tell you, they are permitted to redress their grievances anytime they want. It's a wrong fallacy outside the armed forces for civilians to think that a guy rides roughshod. That once he's the boss, nobody is going to question him. That's a very, very wrong opinion of the armed forces, at least the Indian Air Force, which I've been in for 42 years. I mean, from the time I was a young pilot officer, flying officer, there are occasions where I've taken up the issues with the senior most people. And everybody does it. There is no issue in the Indian Air Force.
Anybody else?
Fali, I would like to ask you one question. Which are the different type of aircrafts you have flown?
Well, I have, till such time I was commissioned, I have flown various types of trainers, the HT2, the Texan, the Vampires, which are all now, they're all faded out. Okay, the old aircraft. And then I've flown helicopters, practically every helicopter in the Indian Air Force. And as the chief, the Air Force belongs to you. It's your Air Force. So I must have flown practically every single aircraft in the Indian Air Force that we have.
Thank you, Fali. You know, your experience in the military, I think, is a learning experience for the youth as well as for people like us who are old, because it's a completely different scenario. And I think we have to learn a lot from the experience which you have as a leader. And I'm very thankful for it.
Thank you, Percy.
Thank you.
We'll have time for one more question. Okay, Fali, it seems to have covered. If there isn't anybody, I'll allow Shehnaz to say a quick thank you. Yeah, sorry. Yes, Kushrav. Yes.
I think your dad had a question.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I was a little surprised that when you had this leadership session, you didn't mention the book that I have written on management, which has a section on leadership. This book I would recommend for all businessmen to read, because it's based on 55 years of experience in the corporate world and as an entrepreneur. The book is available at the WZCC office. Anyone who wants it can send us a message and we'll courier it to them. It's called Learning to Succeed. It's about the 4 functions of management: planning, organizing, leading, and control, and its related activities which are used or applied in business for success. So it's a great learning experience for anyone who reads this. This is what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Daddy. Shehnaz, can I hand over to you to give a vote of thanks?
I am overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. I cannot fit the shoes of all the experienced people that I've been saying. I always maintain that in WZCC, we have a wealth of experience, but today it has been a totally different experience. So let me start first by thanking all you participants, all of us, for coming and making our sessions so interesting, because without participants, there are no sessions. Zubin, you were amazing. I want to travel to all those exotic places, and the message I get is the journey, not the destination. Thank you.
Thank you.
The second segment that featured my young sons, the youngest sons. I am very proud of all 3 of them for the way they presented their leadership styles. Dilshad Jalnawala, Shehryar Unwala, Tushna Siganporia, thank you for sharing your experiences. And then we come to our chief, our leader. His format for this session would not have been possible if we did not have his foresight and empowerment that was given to us. When we discussed this situation, this session with Pali, He said, he felt that the youngsters also should share. And what a sharing this has been. From both perspectives, it has been a great learning experience. Sir, we are very, very grateful. Thank you for mentoring and empowering us and further inspiring us with your leadership perspective. I'm going to teach leadership differently, or rather, I'm going to practice it differently. Thank you for inspiring us to follow the Air Force motto, touch the sky with glory. And as I hand it over back to Zareen, thank you, Zareen, for each and every webinar that has happened over here for a seamless production of the webinar. Thank you, Zareen. Thank you so much, everybody. My life has changed. My learning has changed today. And I've been always saying there's such a wealth of experience that we have in WZCC, the youth and the people who have, I won't call them the oldies, I'll call them the more experienced people who can share and come across on a platform. Thank you. It has been a great experience. Thank you very much.
So before we sign off, I want to tell you that this event on leadership and learnings was brought to you with a deeper meaning for us members of the Bangalore chapter. We have been constantly trying to instill the values of entrepreneurship and leadership in the youth. And by that, I don't just mean our young members, I also mean the children and grandchildren of our members. I am going to ask Zubin to share a poster with you. It's a teaser to an exciting event that our chapter members are currently working on for the month of December. This week-long extravaganza will be a lesson in inspiring leadership for these youngsters who are organizing, presenting, and coordinating many of the events planned for the week. So keep tuned in and definitely save the dates. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
So we'll just leave it on for a minute or so.
Thank you, Zareen, and thank you, Senas, for conducting this webinar so wonderfully. And many thanks to all the participants for having spent such a lot of time with us. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Fali. Thank you.
Thank you, Fali.